Good evening, and I'd like to call the regular monthly meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Could I have a roll call, please?
Commission Member Novitsky.
Present.
Commission Member Ferriandino.
Here.
Commission Member Hoyam.
Here.
Commission Member Schill.
Here.
Commission Chair Zurich.
Here. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes from the September 6th meeting?
So moved. Second.
Motion has been made and second to approve the minutes. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Before we move on to the public hearing, I don't know if you saw the little cards up there again this time. If you wish to speak, please fill out one of those little pieces of paper and bring them up and give them to Shelley, and then she'll call them in order that they were given to her. Thank you. Okay, public hearing for case number 2017-0901, site plan application review amended. This item was tabled at the Planning Commission and Zoning Commission meeting on September 6th, and it is for 1069 Grandview Way and 4729 Grand Avenue in Columbia Heights. And Dominium Development and Acquisitions, LLC, is the person on the agenda.
All right, good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. At this time, Dominium has made a request for site plan review with a waiver to a certain standard of the zoning code to the City of Columbia Heights for the properties located at 1069 Grandview Way and 4729 Grand Avenue. The applicant is requesting approval of the proposed site plan in order to allow for 2 apartment homes to be constructed on the subject properties. The applicant first came before the Planning and Zoning Commission in September. Their application included waivers to the density requirements, parking requirements, and drive aisle width. At the meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission voted to table the application, requesting that the applicant modify the plan to decrease the proposed density and provide an increased parking ratio for underground parking. The applicant has amended the proposed site plan by reducing the density and ratio of surface parking. The current proposal is for 148 units divided between 2 buildings, with 1 3-story building containing 60 units and 1 4-story building containing 88 units. The new proposal is 25 units less than the original 173 unit proposal. The applicant has amended the proposed parking plan. The proposal now calls for 134 parking stalls underground divided between the 2 buildings and 88 surface parking stalls. The new proposal has 47 less parking stalls than the original, which had 135 parking stalls on the surface. The applicant is still requesting a waiver to the parking lot drive aisles, the aisle width, which is required to be 24 feet, and their drive aisle is at 20 feet wide. In regards to the current density and parking requirements, the original proposal exceeded the maximum density and surface parking generally allowed. However, the amended proposal is within the parameters established by the city ordinance, which states that the maximum residential density is 20 units per acre for this area. However, maximum densities may be increased by up to 50% at the sole discretion of the City Council if one or more of the following are provided. It goes on to list 4 situations where the Council can make that decision, and it appears that the applicant meets 2 of those, one being at least 50% of the required parking is provided underground or in parking ramps, and 2, at least 50% of the building ground coverage is concentrated in structures 4 or more stories in height, thereby conserving open space within the mixed-use development area. Additionally, the code allows for cumulative parking requirements to be reduced by up to 30% of required spaces at the sole discretion of the council, again if one or more of the following are provided, and it appears that one has been met by the applicant: superior pedestrian, bicycle, and transit access to the site. As outlined in the city zoning code, the City Council has some discretion when reviewing development proposals located in the mixed-use zoning district, and provided certain conditions are met, the densities can be increased and the parking requirement can be reduced. The applicant has made the argument in the narrative that you received that they meet at least one of the required findings above for both of the density increase of 50% and the parking decrease of 30%. And as I already said, they meet those. So, subject property is located in the mixed-use zoning district. Properties to the north and west are located in the mixed-use zoning district and general business zoning district. Properties to the south are located in the R3 multiple family residential zoning district. Properties to the east are located in the R2B built as duplexes zoning district. The proposed residential development is a permitted use in the mixed-use district. The purpose of this district is to promote efficient use of existing city infrastructure, ensure sensitivity to surrounding neighborhoods, create linkages between compatible areas of the city, provide appropriate transitions between uses, ensure high-quality design and architecture, create good pedestrian circulation and safety, promote alternative modes of transportation, and increase the quality of life and community image of Columbia Heights. The intent of this district is to encourage flexible, high-quality design strategy for development or redevelopment of specific areas within the community. The zoning ordinance specifically identifies the subject property to be used for transit-oriented mixed-use development. The purpose of this area is to promote development and redevelopment that facilitates links and interaction of transit services, housing, and neighborhood services. The focus of land use within the district is to ensure a pedestrian-friendly environment and pedestrian connections to and from residential development and transit facilities. The comprehensive plan guides this area for transit-oriented development. It appears that the proposal for apartment homes meets this intent. The proposal will add additional housing on a high-frequency transit service route along the Central Avenue corridor, which meets the city's goal to encourage more trips via non-motorized modes of travel, pedestrian, biking, etc., and less by automobile. Additionally, the proposal meets the city's goal to incorporate housing and mixed-use developments that is affordable at 60% of the area median income, specifically targeting higher density development that provide workforce housing. The proposal meets the design guidelines, and the zoning ordinance outlines 4 findings of fact that must be met in order for the city to approve a site plan. The first one being the site plan conforms to all the applicable requirements of this article. The amended site plan does not meet one of the applicable requirements of the zoning code, as the proposal shows a 20-foot drive aisle rather than 24 required. The fire department believes that this will suffice for emergency vehicles, providing that the road along the east side of the building, going north and south, is connected to Grand Way North. And this is also in an effort to reduce hard surface on the site. Staff supports the drive aisle width reduction. Site plan is consistent with the applicable provisions of the city's comprehensive plan. As I just outlined, it is. The site plan is consistent with any applicable area plan. There is no area plan for this parcel. The site plan minimizes any adverse impacts on property in the immediate vicinity and the public right-of-way. The amended plan is within the parameters of the city's ordinance, and should the city council grant the increase in density and the decrease in parking, the fire department has stated that 20-foot drive aisle will suffice, and actually that's what the fire code, currently that's their minimum. In conclusion, if the city council were to grant the exception, it would mean that the proposed development could have 30 units per acre. Parking requirements are determined by the number of bedrooms per unit and based on the proposed unit count. For what they're currently proposing, 61 one-bedroom, 45 two-bedroom, and 42 three-bedroom, the proposal would be required to have 164 enclosed parking stalls. The amended plan has 222 parking stalls divided between surface and underground. The applicant has stated that due to easement constraints on the property, it cannot expand the underground parking and has instead chosen to reduce the surface parking, which reduces the visual impact and increases green space. In addition, the applicant has added pedestrian and bicyclist amenities to the amended site plan and argues that the development is designed to encourage pedestrian and bicycle use. There will be enclosed bike parking included in every parking stall, as well as at the entrance to each parking garage and bike racks on the exterior of each building. Also, each parking garage will have a bike repair stand with basic tools for repairing bicycles. Finally, the building will contain amenities such as club rooms, a fitness facility, outdoor play areas, grilling stations, and a dog run. With the reduction of the surface parking and increased pedestrian and bicyclist amenities, allowing for the added 30 surface parking rather than underground parking appears to be a reasonable request. In regards to the remaining waiver requests for 20-foot drive aisle, again, the city's fire chief has said that the minimum drive aisle in the fire code is 20 feet. With that, staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the proposed development for the properties at 1069 Grandview Way and 4729 Grand Avenue, subject to the conditions that are outlined in your report.
Okay. I'm going to ask the commissioners if they have any questions.
Madam Chair, I have a question for you before we get to questions.
For me?
Yes, for you,
Oh,
ma'am.
have a question?
I do. Just on process here, I know there's a lot of people here tonight, and I want to make sure this is perfectly clear. We're not making a final decision tonight. Is that correct? What
We
we do
will-
goes, we recommend what the city council
Oh,
is
we're
going
not
to
the-
do.
we're
Is that
not
correct?
We're not the people who make the decision anyway. If the plan is in accordance to our zoning and our comprehensive plan,
Mm-hmm.
staff has asked us to recommend that we send it on to the city
So
council.
the city, so if I'm correct, the city council makes the final decision on this matter. Is that
Of course
correct?
they do. They have the final decision.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Okay. Adam,
I have no
questions?
right now.
Okay. Stan?
Yeah, I have a question on the required parking. You got 61 one-bedroom, 45 two-bedroom, 42, and it says 164 required parking spots. I don't come up with that at all. I thought it was one per one bedroom and two for every two or more bedrooms. Well, then the requirement is a lot higher than the 164.
Commissioner Member Hoyam, the way that our code is written, for each one-bedroom apartment, one stall is required. For each two- and three-bedroom apartment, two stalls are required. What that means is that, based on that and what their unit count is with the 61 one-bedroom, 45 two-bedroom, and 42 three-bedroom, that would be a required parking of 235 parking stalls. However, what they're doing is requesting a 30% reduction in the parking requirement. That 30% reduction would reduce their parking stall requirement by 70.5, making their requirement 164.5. So if the council decides to grant them a 30% reduction, their requirement would be 164.5, and what they're providing is 222 parking stalls, with 134 of those being on underground parking, and 88 of those being surface stall parking around the building, the two buildings divided between the two.
And then I would ask, and I don't know if I should ask you or the developers, why did they get rid of parking in the second proposal? I mean, that was one of the biggest complaints from everybody in that whole area, us included, that, you know, what they think is adequate parking and what we think is adequate parking is probably not the same. And they removed 47 parking spots. I don't understand that.
Councilmember Hoyam, the site is being marketed as a transit-friendly site. It's in our comprehensive plan and in our zoning ordinance as a transit-oriented development. And so, based on similar apartment developments that they have done, that is a number that they feel is adequate. And that would be something that I would just suggest that you ask them about.
And then my last question, you said there's gonna be enclosed bike parking included in every parking stall. I don't understand that. It's probably not a detail we have to worry about, but
Yeah, so, Commissioner Member Hoyam, you know, in general, we don't get into too much of the nitty-gritty of the interior of these buildings. However, we do look at that parking plan, and that is included in the plans that they submitted. There is a concept plan that shows how that underground parking will look in both buildings. And what they're showing is that for each stall that they're providing
underground.
there will be a wall-mounted bike rack for folks that they can, if they have bicycles, they can store them there. And then in addition to that, at the entrance of each parking garage, they'll have bike racks available, and then also some on the exterior of the building.
Thank you.
Does that answer?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, Rob?
So on the fire code question, I know that I read the fire chief's letter. Is that change in the documents that we have before us now, or is that something that needs to occur?
Excuse me, I'm gonna have a little bit of a cold, so, Commissioner Member Fiorentino, I actually spoke with the fire chief today. The way that they have their, plan proposed right now is more of a landscaped road, so that folks don't, think that they can drive through it. However, in talking with the fire chief today, he actually does want that to be a fully paved road. However, if, it's determined between you know, the neighbors and the developer that they want to have that road blocked off. He's fine with that as long as there's some type of breakaway chain. But yes, the way that they're showing it on the plan, they're still going to need to work out those details with the fire chief, but
Right.
has been added as a condition that there will be a road there,
Okay, thank you.
connection.
Yeah, that's all the questions I have for now, thank you.
Okay, Mike?
I got one question. To get their density ratio, they're using the 15 acres instead of the 5 acres that they are actually building on. How can they justify putting so much density in one little corner of the thing when they're trying to say that it would be spread out?
Commission Member Novitsky, I guess that's a question I would just direct to our applicant.
Yep, well, that's the only concern I really have, because the way that they're getting the 50% increase is using the whole 15-acre site versus the 5.
From a staff's perspective, we've been reviewing it as just this site.
So excuse me, may I?
Yes.
So your assessment that it meets, staff says that it meets the code, is that, maybe I'm a little confused then by what you're asking, Mike?
Well, they're saying that they're using the whole 15 acres to get the 50% increase in density.
Oh, okay,
And
the
we're,
increase.
yes,
Okay.
and it's really, they're only using 5 acres, and if you use the 5 acres, the density is way higher.
But you're saying that it still meets the code at using just the 5-acre footprint?
Commission Member Fiorentino, Novitsky, if you consider the requested density increase and the requested parking decrease, yes, it does.
That's all the questions I have.
Does that answer your question, Mike?
Yeah, we'll see how.
For right now? Okay. All right, since there are no other questions from the commissioners of staff, I will open it to a public hearing, and at this time, I would like to be able to have, yes, please come up. You're from Dominion, correct? Yes, ma'am. All right, the commissioners still have questions of you, and at this time, I'm going to allow them to answer those questions before I open it up for comments. So you want to start, Adam? Do you have any questions of Dominion?
I do, actually. I was wondering, I've noticed that there have been multiple meetings, including members of the neighborhood, and what I'm wondering is how much of this is rewritten for code and how much of this is rewritten taking into consideration the conversations that you've had.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Schill, we certainly feel comfortable as an organization doing higher density and parking ratios that would be even lower than what we're proposing, but based on the requirement of the ordinance and not asking for any waivers for density and trying to fit this within the ordinance, we've come back from that based on neighborhood feedback. We had 2 separate neighborhood meetings to take into account feedback to help put this proposal together, and then took feedback last month at this meeting to further modify our proposal to try to get it to be something that could be acceptable.
Yeah, for now.
Okay, Stan.
I'm still confused as to why you decreased the parking. I know it's to get the underground ratio higher, but green space was never an issue the last meeting we had here. Parking was, and yet you decreased it.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, we left our parking ratio about the same. We did increase the underground parking, but if you look at what the overall.
You didn't increase the underground parking, you increased the ratio.
Correct. So we lowered the unit count by 25 units.
And the
kept
parking
the
spaces
underground
by
parking
47.
the same, that's correct. So we kept our ratio about the same for the underground parking. What I can tell you is, we don't want to overbuild parking. We want to build what's appropriate for the site and what we need within the allowed ordinance. To put it in perspective, and I've got some data that I can share on similar type apartment communities, not in Minneapolis, St. Paul, so outside first, second ring, third ring suburbs. On average, we have about 1.4 adults per unit based on a similar ratio of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments. So 1.4 adults per unit. That would, on this project, equate to 207 adults. If you assume every single adult has a car, which isn't the case in a lot of our developments, that would be 207 cars. We're providing 222 parking spaces, which would allow 15 extra guest spots, should every single adult have a car. Now that's data and demographic data based on our portfolio and our experience in the market, which is vast. So this is based on a feasible number that we feel comfortable with that also blends with the ordinance as staff described. So I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but based on data, yes, we did reduce the surface spots to allow for some additional green space since we reduced the unit count and density, but that is why we did it.
Well, and someplace in your notes here, you said that the surface lot, all the first floor apartments would be walkouts. So how convenient it would be for somebody to park right across from the apartment. Well, when I rented an apartment and I had it underground parking, I parked up top whenever it was nice out, whenever it was easy. And so I'm basically taking two spots now for my one car. One that's reserved underground and one that's on the surface. So I don't know, you used it as a positive in there, but I think that's a negative. And then what about the guy that's gonna have his boat? Which wouldn't be long-term because you can go tell him to move it, but if it takes you 4 days to tell him to move it.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, we do permit parking for all of our surface parking as well, so our residents aren't allowed to just show up and park whatever they want. They're not allowed to do things kind of willy-nilly, so they're very strict requirements. We have tow companies that work for us that manage our parking lots and monitor our parking lots. So
The
it's
car is
very-
gonna have to have a sticker on it or something?
Correct,
Okay.
yes, sir.
Stan, do you mind if I have a follow-up question on that
No,
point?
go ahead.
Do you mind, is that all right?
No, it's fine.
So you're saying, I'm trying to understand the math here. You're saying that since you decreased the number of apartments, you don't need as many parking stalls, is that correct?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, yes, sir.
That's, okay.
Okay, I have a quick question. Is the ratio similar between this project and other projects you've done so that you're comfortable with the fact that you've cut down on the amount of parking and there's not going to be parking on the loft project property?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, we're very comfortable with our parking ratio. On a transit-friendly site like this, we would be comfortable as going as low as one stall per apartment unit. So we, in our calculation, actually think we're probably providing about 50% more than we need, given the transit-friendly nature of the site, but given trying to balance green space, amenity space, and parking requirement, your ordinance, we've had it and are arguing for that 1.5 roughly stalls per apartment unit. So yes, we're very comfortable with an even lower amount.
Okay, the other question is about the underground versus the surface parking. Are people willing to park in the underground because it's gonna cost them extra, correct?
Madam Chair, yes, that we do plan on charging for the underground parking. We have a pretty high success of occupancy in buildings that put an appropriate number of underground parking spots. So we're
Okay.
confident with the math on that and the financial risk that we'll be taking on that, and are very confident that we'll be able to lease those up appropriately so that we have it full too and not just an empty underground parking garage.
Okay, I read the part of the report where you talked about your other projects and the ratio of parking and stuff. I should have written down how many that was, but how many have you already done where you have found that the parking ratio works?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, we have built 3 similar, I would say, transit similar developments. So the Pillsbury A Mill in Minneapolis, it's near bus. It's not even as close as this bus stop is to the site. We have under 1, so we have about 0.8 stalls per unit, and they're mostly underground with just a little bit of surface because the historic buildings. The Schmidt Brewery in St. Paul's on a bus line on West 7th we finished. That has 1-to-1, and they're all surface parking spots. And then Buzza Lofts in Uptown is a similar, and those are all 3 of these are affordable apartment communities. That one we have 1-to-1 surface parking with no underground. So all 3 of those developments are similar workforce, affordable at this similar income and rent range, and those all have around 1-to-1 or less parking. So given this location being first-ring suburb, becoming more urban, and the improvements along Central for high-frequency bus and the planned BRT expansion, we're very confident that It's a number that we'll likely not need in the future. We think it's the right number for today, but we think given self-driving cars and transit improvements, that this need is the highest it will ever be today. And every year that goes by, we think the demand is going to be even less.
Okay, well, thank you for answering those. Okay, Mike?
You answered, it was, the payment for the stall parking underneath was a big concern, and we'll just, my question's been answered so far.
Okay. All right, did you?
Oh, I do have one more.
Yes, you may.
Thank you. So what is the plan to deal with the fire lane there? Are you gonna leave that as, are you gonna rechange the plan, or tell me how you're gonna address that?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, we got feedback from the neighborhood and from the existing townhomes and single family, as well as the condo association, that they would prefer the road on the east side of the building not have a physical connection, other than for fire, where you could have breakaway bollards, et cetera. If it's ultimately required that has to be open, we're fine with that. But we think, given trying to manage some of those other factors at play, that limiting traffic there for regular vehicular traffic would be preferred. So we're open to either way. We think it can be successful either way, but certainly would have a preference to limit it to just, safety, fire truck access if we could.
So the fire chief is okay with like a breakaway, I don't want to call it a breakaway, but a temporary barrier, so that they don't have to worry about people using that to drive their cars. It would only be for fire truck access.
Madam Chair, the Commissioners, that's absolutely true. There's, as far as I understand it, that we can design it in a way that can look landscaped and friendly, but could support a fire truck. And it could have, they're called breakaway bollards.
Okay.
You could have that have basically a little lock on them, and a fire truck drives up to them, puts a little pressure, and it's enough to snap the lock, put them down without even getting out to unlock them or anything like that. And then if a regular car hit them, certainly they could, in theory, break them down as well, going fast enough, but it's probably not something that most of us would want to do to our vehicles.
Yeah.
How about the police department? Are they an issue? With do we ask them, or do we?
Commissioner Member Hoyam, in general, our development review staff includes planning staff, so myself, the community development director, as well as a building official from the building inspections department, the fire chief from the fire department, and our public works director, city engineer from the public works department. So no, we don't typically consult the police on development reviews.
Okay.
And a question for Elizabeth then. So as this development does or doesn't move forward, they're going to work with the fire chief, and and we've added the condition that they need to get his approval before it can proceed. Is that correct?
That's correct, Commissioner Member Fiorentino. It's my understanding that he has some concerns about the landscaped part of the road connecting the two. And the reason being is over time, people forget it's there, it might not get plowed. Maybe someone will all of a sudden plant something or move rocks there or something. I guess this has happened at another development in Columbia Heights, where now the fire truck can't access that location. And so that was his concern. And so what he's preferring, and that's something that I know I've talked to their architect and engineering staff about, that they'll have to work that out with our fire chief as far as how that's going to be designed. But he would prefer for that to be a completely connected road.
Okay.
But his approval is required,
Yes,
the fire chief's.
that's correct.
Thank you.
Well, it sounded like he did. And he was
With
okay
the-
with the minimum of 20.
Right. I just want to make sure that
And then
that's.
with the connection, which I would imagine that the loft owners, they did not want there to be a continual connection.
Sure.
Because people would use it as an extra road to maybe make a shortcut.
Yeah.
And they don't want that, but the fire department needs to have a road that gets them not only to this development, but to the loft building also.
That is correct.
Okay.
I'm sorry, how do roads like that get plowed then?
Oh,
With
that
your
was
with
my
the with your
question too,
breakaway
yeah.
baller there?
This would be, sorry, I'll let you go.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, that what typically happens is you've seen permeable pavers potentially where grass and water can get through, but it's a paver. It's almost like a CMU block turned on its side, so water and stuff can get through. So it's something you can drive over, so it's easy for a plow to come in, and it would just be a snow blower or something like that that would clear that, so fire trucks.
Oh, so you would do that, not,
Correct.
okay, very good, okay, right, because these are all private roads,
Yeah,
right,
Madam
I'm
Chair,
sorry.
Commissioners, this
I
is
was-
a
yeah,
private
yeah, yeah,
road, so
thank
it'd
you.
be on us, and I'm sure part of any sort of development agreement or something, should this proceed, that we'd have to kind of clarify and formalize that.
Do you have provided space for snow storage in case we have one of our world-famous Minnesota winters?
Well, Madam Chair, Commissioners, hopefully global warming will help us, but in the case it doesn't, we definitely have ability to store
To store
snow
it,
on site.
okay.
And we're also very used to actually having to haul snow off-site. For
Okay.
those other sites I mentioned are so tight, we actually have to haul snow off-site
Okay.
as well. So between the two, we have it covered.
All right, very good, okay. If we have all had our questions answered for now, then,
Don't go anywhere.
don't go anywhere though.
Did I do my portion of the public?
Yes,
hearing first?
yes, okay, yes. So now I'll open it up to the rest of the public hearing. And if you filled out a card and she has it over there, Shelley has it, she will call your name, and at which time you come up to the podium and you can direct the questions at staff, your comment to us, or you can ask the Dominion people a question also. Okay, you could possibly sit down so that there's room for the other person.
Yes, I will, I'll be brief.
Okay.
Madam Chair, Commissioners. Again, Owen Metz with Dominium. I've been there about 11 years. So I've been doing affordable housing and housing my whole time in the Twin Cities here. We're a 40-year-old company, as I mentioned last month, and specialize in rental housing and primarily affordable. So this is the type of housing that we specialize in across the country, but we're based here in the Twin Cities and are working on another apartment community across town in your community. So I just want to be brief because I'm sure others want to talk, and we got to hopefully go see the Twins win. But want to thank staff for their time to review our updated proposal, and thank all of you for your feedback, as well as members of the public for giving us feedback last month. We do take that stuff seriously and feel we've come up with a modified site plan that kind of threads the needle and tries to accomplish a lot of different goals in not only the comp plan and looking at TOD and nature development, as well as balancing what we need to do to make the project work. So I want to highlight a couple things. If I could have the screen potentially go up to here on the podium. So I just want to bring folks back. This is the entire 15-acre development that was approved back in 2003. This is a site plan from the 2003 Planning Commission approval. I've got a copy of the the entire planning report from 2003. The hashed building is the condo building that got built, I think 66 condominiums. Based on that approval back in 2003, there was 218 homes between the 3 condo buildings and the 20 townhomes. That equated to approximately 15 units an acre across the entire 15 acres. So I just want to put that in reference to kind of frame what was approved 14 years ago at the Planning Commission, those 218 units, again, across that. Yes, sir?
Quick question, how many are in the condo unit itself? Do you know how many units there are?
Yes, sir. So Madam Chair, Commissioners, the hash building, I believe, got built with 66 apartment, or 66 condos. That was what was approved. I don't know for sure that was exactly what was built, but it's in that range. And then building 2 and 3 were proposed for another 66 condominium units at that time. So multifamily, 4-story, very similar to what's there today. So between those 2 condo buildings that did not get built, there was 132 condominiums, to put that in reference. So we're proposing 148 units, so 16 more apartment units. And based on the original plan of 15 units an acre, when you look at those additional 15 units, that brings the overall density here to 16 units an acre. So it's 1 unit per acre of additional density on here, which is still well within the 20 units per acre that as a overall development was allowed per the redevelopment of this area and the comp plan and everything for that area. Now, we think that doesn't require any density increase, but based on the analysis done by staff, even if you look just at our piece of it for these 2 buildings, we fall within the allowed amount. So I just wanted to frame that to just show how it seems like a lot of density, but it's 15 units more than what was approved 14 years ago across here. So it's 7 or 8 units a building. The other thing is we have fewer bedrooms on average. So those 132 condos had 256 bedrooms approved within them, based on 62 of those being 2 bedrooms and 4 of those being 1 bedrooms. And I can show you the math from the staff report from 2003 that showed that. So that 256 bedrooms, if you look at our bedroom count today, is 277. So that's 21 more bedrooms. And the majority of those are in 2 and 3 bedroom apartments. So that tends to be families. It's not a lot of adults splitting an apartment. It tends to be mothers with children and things like that live here. So I just wanted to frame that. That's, yes, it's additional density over what was approved. Yes, it's bordering on that 30 units an acre. But when you look at the entire 15 acres and what was approved, it's a very nominal increase. And we feel that that is appropriate given the increase in transit from 14 years ago of how Central has improved and how BRT is planned for this area. We think providing a site here for workforce housing, for folks that want to live and work in Columbia Heights, to have access to that transit and high quality luxury, affordable, we think is something that will be wildly successful and hope you agree. So I just wanted to really frame that a little bit. I think the staff report that was done really frames it well, and I really just wanted to highlight that based on this and based on our professional experience in managing housing across the United States, we're very confident that parking ratio meets ordinance and hope you approve it. So thank you for your time and happy to stand for questions.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, Shelley.
Okay, I have Mr. Keurig.
Good evening, Commissioners, City Council person, City staff, thank you for your work. I'm Tom Kurek, and I've been involved from the beginning with this development site. And it was a 15-acre site in the beginning, and that included the Kmart entrance down to 65 and the Hy-Vee gas station. I don't know if that means anything, okay? It was just mentioned that they're only 15 over the unit count than the proposed condo buildings, but the condo buildings had the design of a parking space for every bedroom, underground. So I don't know why they can't do that. In the audience, I was told that we've been talking about 5-acre site that they're purchasing. I believe it's 4.7, and I believe 4 acres is buildable because we have those boulder walls on this neighborhood. 3-side, it's boxed in, which means that this is a very different than an open block neighborhood to me. This is a little neighborhood that I invested in because it is unique. It's a very nice little neighborhood, and I'm standing before you now to ask you not to grant variances to build something other than what it was built for and what the people, homeowners who live there, bought into. At my original meeting where I met Owen, I asked him a couple of times what he felt about someone promising, a builder promising one thing, and then selling us down the river by going for more money to sell it for apartment buildings. All of the people that bought in that condo building were told that it was going to be an affordable place to live because there's going to be 2 more condo buildings, and all those owners are going to be contributing to a master association fee so that we can have a nice complement of amenities. Real estate downturn made us suffer a long time, but now we're at the point where we can build those condos. and I'm on the condo board, and the board has got a fire under it. And we're motivated now to make those condo buildings happen. But there's a purchase agreement for an apartment building that says they need to build something incredibly dense so there won't even be room for snow storage. Well, the owners in that condo building would rather have their original neighborhood built, and we're working to make that happen when this purchase agreement to the apartment building goes away. In fact, the proposed builder that we've approached, the marketing agent, has made an offer to Dominion to buy the purchase agreement. So they won't even be out. If they really do need to have a 50% density increase over city code, if you deny that, if they really do need that, if you deny it, I guess they're gonna go away. That's what we'd prefer. But you guys are not gonna pick winners and losers, but you're choosing us as losers, us homeowners on that site, if you approve a variance that allows the apartment that's so dense they don't have room for snow. And they don't have underground parking like our buildings were designed for. I'm sorry about being so passionate. I just want to ask you not to approve the variance. That's it. Thank you, sirs. Madam?
Thank you for your comment.
Okay, Mr. Warren Danger?
Madam Chairman, council members. Yeah, I'm Warren Danger. I live at 1070 Grandview Court, one of the condominiums. And following what Tom had to say, I too would do have a concern about the 30% less parking in the proposed new buildings. And also the option of people, wanting to pay for underground parking if they wish. And I think a lot of people may decide, forget that, I'm not gonna pay extra for parking. That throws quite a bit of a problem for surface parking, in an area where it's gonna be tight anyway. So that's one problem that I think would be something to really consider about approving this. Tom mentioned about not even a place to once the streets are cleared of snow and whatever, where are you going to store the snow? Well, I'm also wondering about, right now, the condo association, which we are, we're part of, pay for clearing the snow and whatever. I'm wondering, I haven't heard any kind of an agreement if this goes ahead, is all of the maintenance of streets, snow removal, and whatever else, is that going to continue to fall on the condo association that exists right now? Are the new apartment buildings going to be able to attach onto that and are they going to have a share in that? That's something that just has occurred, maybe has occurred to other people prior to this, but just thought of that now. Haven't heard anything about that. Another thing, at the previous meeting, it was mentioned that Grand Avenue, between 47th and 49th, is extremely busy, especially in the mornings and in the afternoons. A lot of traffic, a lot of foot traffic, a lot of students. And students are, as everybody used to be a student, notorious for don't bother walking on the sidewalk, walk on the street, whatever. So besides all the traffic and whatever, so you've got lots of students, lots of cars, lots of people cutting between 47th and 49th. And just a lot of extra traffic. Gonna need a stoplight on both ends of Grand, or you're gonna have some serious problems with injuries and just a plain choked ruckus of traffic. I know that doesn't, maybe that's not a big problem to some people, but that's another thing to consider, that there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be choking that area and trying to pass that particular street when you put in 2 more buildings and, a lot of people trying to use that all at the same time. So just like you to look at things and consider it very, very carefully, and really think about, changing and granting any variances to some pretty sensible rules that are already in place. I'd appeal to you to not grant variances that are going to have a lot of effect on things that are already in place. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you. Are we gonna have them address any of these questions as we go, or have them come
Do you
back
want
again?
him to
It's up
address
you.
them as we go?
John Bush?
Would that make more sense?
Mine, it's-
I'm sorry, what is your name again? Owen. Would you like to address some of these as we go along, or do you want to make notes and then address them when we finish? All right, okay. Then we'll continue with the comments.
My name is John Bush, and I'm owner of Unit 203 in the condo buildings at 1070. And I have a couple questions. First of all, I do comment on, I appreciate the Dominion company, what they're trying to do. I understand this is part of life when we have changes. Changes are hard. We came into this situation believing, as has been mentioned, that these would be condos, and we invested our money with that in mind. So that's why I have the concern. This is quite different than what was originally proposed. My first question is regarding the density and the acreage. I understood that we base the density on the buildable acreage. And yes, there is between 4.7, I've heard, and 4.94 acres there, but the buildable acres, I understood, are 4. Therefore, then we're looking at 20 units per acre. 20 times 4 would be 80. Now, if we give the variance, then you'd be looking at an additional 50%, which would bring it up to 120 units. We have a proposal of 148 units based on the idea that the whole unit is included in that. And I believe that in reading that this is and that's what my question is for staff, is it based on buildable acreage or the overall acreage?
It's, sir, the unit per acre count is based on the total lot area.
The total lot area.
That's correct.
So if you see my drawing here, I don't know where I put this to have it shown. If I can have
Right
it
there on
shown.
that mat, it says.
On this, okay.
Yep.
Here's my great drawing. And if you look at this, this is the stone wall all around. It makes what was already pointed out, the area that's buildable is the 4 acres. What's here is there's a road around the edge, and maybe they can use that, as part of their buildable site. But this is a big stone wall going up. So you really reduce, you're adding density to density is what I'm trying to say. Even though if it's on the whole amount, I read that that was not the fact, and I'm going to check that. I'd like to have it confirmed in my mind, but that's what I read. And I have an ability to remember a lot of things. So I'll be checking that. But that's important to me because we're adding density to density. What I called last time I spoke, it's mega density that you're asking us to endure. Now, let's go back to the parking issue, if I may. I'm a retired pastor. I've been before committees like this, usually a little better prepared than I am tonight. But
With better drawings,
yeah, with better drawings for sure. But the whole point is that I've been on the other side and trying to get a church through, and it was amazing that, you know, they didn't consider the parking need based on during the day. They always seem to want to know who's going to park there on Sunday. When is the maximum use for the site? So I'm imagining these residents, don't they have friends? Don't they have family? If I were living there in one of the units, and they sound very nice, I think I might enjoy living there. But I have grandchildren, and the grandchildren have parents, and they're all going to come over on my birthday. Where are they going to park? And I presume that other people have birthdays, other people have holidays, where there's going to be a heavier use and need for parking. So if I drive by and then no one's using the parking, I might think everything's fine. But on the weekend or on a Friday night, there may be a major problem, or when people try to head out to work. Now, we drove here tonight and we went by Oak Hill Baptist Church. That's a church I'm acquainted with. Next to Oak Hill Baptist Church are some large apartment buildings. They have parking on the street, not underneath. And where do they park? They park on the street. And it's like bumper to bumper parking all the way up to the church parking lot. They can't park in the church parking lot because there's activities there tonight and tomorrow night. The parking lot will be full. But there's parking bumper to bumper on both sides of the street. You can check it out. That's what I don't know if that'll be true here, but I'm envisioning that. I would think it'd be wonderful to have a bike rack in every stall and make it required by law, and we'll ride our bikes. But this is Minnesota, and I have a hard time visioning that I'm gonna be able to ride my bike and it's 20 degrees outside, or it's snowing and icy. It just doesn't make sense. That might help a few months of the year. What about the bus? I watched, in our condo building, we're not wealthy people. You go look at the cars in there. They're not expensive cars. I think we might be very close to the demographic that is being proposed here. We all have cars. We may not use them all the time, but we have cars. If I'm to ride the bus, I gotta walk 2 blocks to get to the bus, and I gotta go across a busy highway. And a lot of times you wait 5 to 10 minutes for that light to change, to cross over. It's not that friendly going toward town. Now, if I want to go the other direction, it might be a little friendlier. But these are issues that make me concerned about the overall parking. I think the original proposal that included more surface parking was very wise. We still need more underground parking. The last question I have is, can non-residents rent a parking space? Or is it just your residents can rent the parking space underground? So I appreciate if you'd answer that when your turn comes again, Owen. I again would say with the other residents, we're the ones that this really impacts. Somebody that lives on the other side of the city is really here because they're concerned about having rental units available in our city, which I believe in too. I think everyone needs a place to live, and they can't always afford to have a house of their own. But we had an agreement, and we've sort of been several times, we're fighting our own city, and we're the taxpayers. We're the ones paying the bill. We're fighting our own city to be able to enjoy what we worked all our lives to try to achieve. And this seems to me to be high density, very few parking places, and reality doesn't match up with the statistics. The reality is, go down any street in our community and people are parking on the streets. And we've got to do something to solve that. There isn't adequate, because of our weather, it isn't adequate to not have that and not require it. It was required for us. Why can't we get that from this developer? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Okay, Mr. Roger Johnson?
Madam Chairman, council members, I guess I believe in what ifs, and this is a question for your fire chief, actually. And picture it's the middle of the winter, the snow plow hasn't been through here yet, or on Grand, and they're parked on both sides of the street. Ask your fire chief if he can get his equipment through there under those conditions. And I'll bet you he'll say he can't. So that's something to consider, because let's face it, we're in Minnesota. It's going to snow here. So, and when they get the streets plowed out, who knows? That isn't something that happens instantly. And if there was a fire, God forbid, up in here with this kind of density, the whole place would go down. I guess that's about all I have to say. If you have any questions for me, I'll be more than happy to answer them, but I think I've said what I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you, council.
Elizabeth Herman? She's not here right now? Okay. Okay. Dennis Shellstad?
Hi, my name is Dennis Schulstead. I've lived at Century Courts for a little over 4 years, homeowner. I think when I put this in, I think some of the things that I wanted to mention have been covered, but I'll do my best here. One of the things that problems with our density is if you've ever been in our complex, there's really only one way in. It's almost like living on a cul-de-sac. There's one way in kind of and one way out, especially for our building. And by adding, way more units, that road is going to be heavily traveled. I just thought I'd mention, when I pulled out of our condo building up and then turned to the north to get out, there were cars parked alongside the building and on the other side. There's only room for one car to go down the middle. 2 cars can't pass. So by adding, 150, 60 more units, that problem is going to be a whole lot greater, particular rush hour traffic, your morning traffic, evening traffic. Another concern of mine is when I bought my unit, it was explained that it's all the rocks around it, the community room, that everybody paid into that thing. And this proposal is they're wanting to cut off their, I've heard it, 4 acres, 4.8, they want to cut off their piece and not pay for the other acreage. There's a huge community room we're all paying extra for. It's going to get worse if they are not part of our association. Our homeowners you know, we pay association fee. It's, pretty stiff because of those 2 units not being there. And it's gonna get worse if you don't build condos there, because they won't be chipping in to our overall, area. And I think I mentioned this, and this is kind of my last thing, is when I bought my unit, it was a woman, I can't remember her name, blonde lady, talked about this area, and she's, you know, I said, well, how long will it take before they're gonna build the other 2 units? She says, I don't know, but, and I specifically asked about condos, how soon would they be built, and she didn't have any idea. But she did assure me that they were gonna be built, they were gonna be condos, and I purchased my unit on that basis, not expecting that we're gonna have rental units, my version of subsidized rent units. So, that's really all I wanted to say is, this is not a good deal for us that are living in the condo building that we live in. And I really hope that you reject their proposal. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Okay, Elizabeth Herman?
Yeah, I apologize.
No, that's all right.
I'm a working person, and I hate phones being, but I don't have a landline. I'm Elizabeth Herman, 950 39th Avenue Northeast, Apartment 6, and I welcome this proposal. I am recently here, 4 years or so, and I have a couple of concerns about the fact that it has been a vacant lot for 14 years. I understand the economy with the market and stuff. I lost my house, so now I am a returning to the cities, or as close as I can get, renter. And there is a very low vacancy rate in the cities as well as the first ring, second ring suburbs. I am also avid supporter of public transportation. I am observant of the fact that we are in the 21st century and proud that the 10 is almost 24-hour line available to those with various working schedules. Myself, I started at 4 o'clock. I am a bus driver, so I am very familiar with the traffic of youngsters. I am also an ISD 13 employee. So my school route includes North Minneapolis, Northeast Minneapolis, which has very busy roadways with 2-sided parking oftentimes. I believe it's no overnight parking in Columbia Heights in very many locations as far as the street parking goes. I also understand that millennials and the trend, like when you get into the Northeast area, is to utilize public transportation. I think the amenities for those bicyclists and pedestrians is very welcoming. As an ISD 13 employee, I am very aware of 49th, and in fact, there's a Safe Streets Committee working on that, and there are very many areas in the city missing sidewalks, by the way. You were talking about the increased traffic if 2 more buildings are constructed. Well, it sounds like the proposal that is before the Planning and Zoning Commission, which is just basically the variance, the 20-foot is to accommodate what the condos have as far as design aesthetics and utilizing leftover space for green space. So I understand the concerns. I'm safety oriented, and I'm glad that that was addressed by the fire department, and I believe that the police department will be so for joining. So anyways, you guys talking about how it's going to get worse. Well, the fact is that this proposal is here for maybe an outside group. It sounds like those other 3 developments, Pillsbury, Schmidt, and the other one, probably have full occupancy or pretty close. So there is definitely a need for this as demonstrated by other projects in the area. I have friends that don't have cars, believe it or not, and the bicycles are from your house or your apartment to the bus stop. You put it in the front, and then you're able. There is also a 801 commuter line as far as frequency goes. So you can go from the Brooklyn Center, Transit to the Roseville Transit. So I believe that transit is the way to go in this 21st century. That is the comprehensive plan with the higher density and the oriented development. I also do not know for sure the makeup of the condo building that is there. I understand your concerns. I think that you're used to not having any neighbors, and that's kind of nice, you know, when you're the first one in the development, you don't want any, you know, shade or other buildings around you. But the thing is, it sounds like now, if you guys deny this proposal, it's so that this new one can be concocted and maybe go back to the two buildings with the 66, but I don't think it's going to be one umbrella condo association. So your concerns about how this snow removal is going to be paid for and where it's going to go, or, you know, the whatever other concerns that you have as condo owners. But what I was going to say is that I don't know the makeup, but it seems like a lot of you may be retirees, and I hate to say you and me or whatever, but the retirees probably are not part of that working group, which is what is targeted by this development and the comprehensive plan addressing the fact of increased density. And I also suspect from being here, and I'm glad that there are 3 guys that weren't here last time, here tonight, that some of you might be snowbirds, and I do believe that some of those units now are rentals. So, the fact of the matter is that Columbia Heights is a desirable community. I believe this development will make it even more so, and I am here to put my support behind, and I'm glad that you made the amendments and are trying to accommodate the concerns of those that are occupying that block now. But right now, it's not generating any revenue. It's an open land, and maybe if we got off the car, we could get less car businesses, and maybe if we had welcoming these 148 units and families, we could get additional development along Central Avenue. That's in a nutshell. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Mr. Kurak again?
I do though.
Thank you for the second opportunity. I thought you might be interested in how we handle, in our condo development, the parking for parties and stuff. We have a community building, which the one condo building, which has to pay all the bills for currently, and we'd like to have some neighbors that would help us pay for it. It was designed for the 3 buildings. 10 parking spaces, 5,000 square foot community room that has a cleaning fee of $75 when you use it. And there's also a big patio for summertime stuff. The autonomous, the independent apartment building won't be availing itself of that and the parking spaces. So kind of a waste. Underutilized, we pay more, and it wasn't designed that way. So, just so you don't think that it's apples and apples, if it's built out as a condo development, it won't be exactly the same as an apartment development. It'll be home ownership, they'll be contributing to our master association, and they'll be using the community building. And as we're moving forward, we're anticipating adding more amenities and having a lower price even with more amenities, workout room and stuff like that, because more people are sharing it. Earlier, I started talking about Owen, speaking of how we were getting screwed. One of our meetings, our first meeting that I was at, Owen said, yeah, you're getting screwed by the guy who developed your condos. But he's dead now. I said, no,
Yes, we know.
no, that corporation was handed over to Dave Klober. And Dave Klober is the current owner of that corporation, and he is going for bigger bucks selling to Owen. And Owen is buying from the guy who promised all of our owners that it'd be a condo association. So, yeah. Finally got that out. Thank you for your time.
Some of us were here and remember that.
Thank you, sir.
name's Tony Bodway. I'm also in the 1070 building, Unit 318. I'm a realtor, have been for about 20 years. I've done a bunch of developing myself. I've been in front of these councils before. You guys are never in a good situation. I would ask, and I've been in situations where I've tried to get variances, and most of the time, variances aren't granted. That may happen here, I don't know. I would request that you not pursue variances, because the rules are there for a reason. They tend to make things good. I'm gonna digress a little. Our building has underground parking. The entire plan was designed for underground parking and minimal exterior parking for visitors. We struggle with that just on the basis of the size of the facility that we have. When we get a friend over or somebody like that comes over, the parking is full all the time. If we clean our garage out underneath, we occupy the entire street for overnight parking. If we're removing snow and we've got cars outside, there's constant, I mean, it's just constant chaos with that. The reason that's concerning to me is that if the apartment building has permitted parking, you can't park anywhere around their facility without a permit. That makes sense to me under their parking. But let's say I'm a visitor to one of those tenants in that apartment building and I don't have a permit. So if I don't have a permit, where am I gonna park? I'm gonna park where permits aren't required, which is in our parking. So the limited parking that we're authorized right now is gonna be occupied by visitors potentially. And it all kind of comes back to that. The parking issue is a major problem there, and I don't see it getting any better. So the main thing I would ask for is that you just don't give variances, not to that degree. The other thing that we've been talked to, I've been at all the meetings. I'm a board member for the building there. And we started out with a very high number of apartments. It was around 200 was our first meeting, or somewhere in there, Owen, I don't remember. Came down to 170 something, and that, at the last meeting, that was as low as they could go, or the project would not go forward. It just won't go forward if we go any lower. Now we're at 143, I think.
48.
So we dropped an additional 20-some units or whatever it was, and now I'm sure that that's as low as they can go. The original plan, and I don't care if it's owners or tenants or what it is, it doesn't make any difference to me because we're all people. But the occupancy there, if it's gonna go through, I'd like to see it personally, and I think in general, just stay within the original guidelines of what the units were and have the parking underground. I mean, it's just, that's what was approved. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Brenna Zermet? I know I'm killing these, sorry.
Hi, I'm Brenna Zymet. I live at 4225 6th, so I don't live in the complex, but I love Columbia Heights, and I really see the future of this city going towards the way that like Northeast is going, where it's becoming this like very hot place to live. People are moving from uptown to Northeast, and there has been a trend amongst people in my age demographic and younger. Columbia Heights is really, really attractive. And for that demographic of people, transit is really popular, and being green is really popular. And so I guess as I've listened to the condo owners, I understand that this is very different than what they were promised. It's very different than how they live. And yet I think that really if you listen to the actual statistics, because what I'm hearing is a lot of what ifs, and I'm afraid of, and can you imagine, and this is what my birthday party looks like. And I think that we're looking at stuff from the lens of maybe who's there now, And I think if we look at the lens of who we as a city are trying to be and who we're trying to attract and what will come next, I think that the numbers that the builders are showing us are they're actual numbers that work in communities like where we can be headed. And I think that it really fits with our plan as a city going forward, like what we want to look at. I mean, I was at the library the other day looking at how we want to develop this area so that it's different. And I think that there's so much fear a lot of times in our developments that we don't want it to be different. And yet, I think when we keep doing what we've always done, we're going to get what we always got. And if we bring in nice, beautiful, affordable apartments that bring more transit and better upgrades to bus lines and the people that we would really like to attract to make Columbia Heights a desirable place, it's gonna be different. And I think that really, I would just say to the council, I really hope that you look at that as goals versus voting no out of fear.
Thank you for your comment.
Mary Granlund? That one I got right. I mean, there's a wild flavor.
They're talking about.
Hi, my name is Mary Granlund. Oh, do you need
Hang on just a
sorry.
second, I'm trying to get.
Yeah, that might be a good question for Elizabeth.
Okay.
Because I had that too.
Yeah, all right. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm going to ask a question of Elizabeth.
A lot of
and-
people have raised this
And
issue.
a lot of people have raised the issue of the variances. My understanding is that the only thing we are changing is the width of that emergency road. That according to the zoning ordinance and the comprehensive plan, they have met all of the other thing, it's within that, the comprehensive plan and within the zoning, as far as density, as far as size, as far as parking. Am I correct?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, there is still one waiver technically being requested, and that is the drive aisle width, the 4-foot waiver essentially. The other two requests, which were originally waivers, have been reduced to something that's called out within the parameters of our zoning ordinance. So our zoning ordinance allows for them to make that request to increase their density and reduce their parking by 30% and increase the density by 50% and decrease the parking by 30%. So our zoning code calls that out and says that the city council has that discretion and that
So
flexibility.
it's not our discretion,
That
it's
is
going
not-
to be the city council's discretion to do that.
Correct. Technically, if you'd like, you could make a recommendation on the waiver of the 20-foot drive aisle, but it's really the council that makes that decision. The planning commission does not approve those waivers.
Right.
You're really here to look at the site plan.
So in staff's opinion, it meets the requirements for the density increase because the building is 4 stories tall,
That's correct.
and that's a fact, and that's what our code calls for, right? And the parking requirement reduction is met because
Based on their.
on the pedestrian and bicycle and transit access.
That's correct.
Okay. And that's why it meets the code. So that's why they're not asking for a variance.
In staff's opinion, that's correct. And that is why they're not
So
asking
we're really
for a
not dealing with
waiver.
any variances.
You are dealing with a
A
waiver.
waiver.
Yeah.
I think a waiver
Well,
is
the city
different
council
than-
the only waiver we're dealing with is the drive
The
width,
drive,
which I think we
lane.
kind of all agree
Am I
that that's.
Maybe, Ms.
Yeah.
Madam Chair and board members, there are no variance requests from a legal perspective.
Right.
That's a different
Right.
issue, it's a different item. That's not involved here. The design guidelines within the zoning code are set up to govern developments. The only design guideline waiver that's being requested is the change in the drive aisle width. And typically that drive aisle width is set for public safety concerns. It's plenty big enough for cars to back in and out of, that's not the issue. It's for emergency vehicles to get through. And that's why it's always reviewed by not the police department, because they really don't have the type of vehicles emergency vehicles that are larger than normal vehicles that people drive. It's the fire department, they got the big trucks. And so that's why the fire chief is always in regards to site plan review. And that's gonna be a waiver request that's only considered by the council. This body is advisory to the council for that. The council can choose to take your advice or it can choose to ignore your advice and do whatever it wants to. But this is part of the process that it needs to go through to get to the council. I suspect we'll have a mirror kind of a meeting here when it gets to the council with different people sitting up at the table. And that's fine, that's the process that it needs to go through. So you aren't approving or denying anything, you're making a recommendation for the council to consider in granting the waiver of the design guideline for the reduction in the drive aisle width. With regard to the density and the parking requirements, there is really nothing at this hearing involving those two issues, because they have reduced the density to a standard that allows for the council, under our existing ordinance, to approve that density with no waiver, no variance, no other determination other than the council's that it is appropriate to do that. That's within their discretion. They aren't required to do it. They still have discretion, but it falls within the guidelines of the ordinance of our city code to allow the developer to ask and for the council to consider it. The same is true for the parking. The parking, because of the units were reduced, the parking standard is reduced as far as numbers. They're asking, and because they meet the transit-oriented development type, which is zoned as transit-oriented, then they are allowed to ask the council for a reduction in the parking requirement. And that's what they will be doing, just as in the density. It's not a variance, it's not a waiver, because it falls within the parameters of the existing zoning ordinance. The council still has to approve it. And this body could certainly out of this meeting, could certainly say to the council, well, we recommend that you do it or don't do it or whatever. That's fine. I'm sure they'd probably be interested in what this body has to say as far as what a vote would look like.
Okay.
But there's no determination and no final decision being made on anything here, and there is only one waiver that's being requested.
Okay. Thank you. All right. You may, and I'm sorry that I interrupted you. I needed to get clarification.
No, that's totally fine. It was very helpful for me too. My name is Mary Granlund. I actually live right down the road from this development, this proposed development and the condos. I'm at 949 44th Avenue. So I was at the last meeting as well, and tonight, again, as well as at that first meeting, I heard some concerns about traffic on 49th. This is an issue that I am intimately aware of. I am one of the founding members of the Columbia Heights Citizens for Safer Streets, which was specifically looking at traffic on 49th. I don't know how many people were able to make it or are aware of it that are living in the condos who are concerned about traffic, but we've had a lot of movement on that from the county and the city and the school district. So traffic concerns, definitely, I hear ya. And the city and the county and the school district are all listening to community members that are coming out and helping name those concerns. So I just kind of want to put that out there. The second thing is I'm a social worker. Now, social workers don't actually make very much money. I know everybody thinks, well, I go and I pay $150 for an hour for somebody to tell me about my feelings. I don't actually get that money, ever. Ever. And I'm a supervisor, and I work with a lot of young, really great coming up professionals. And I walk around, my office is 5 miles from here. And I get to talk about how much I love living in my city and how great it is and how wonderful it is to be this small community so close to downtown and so close to work and so close to all of these things that I love. And my colleagues and the staff that I supervise, they can't afford a house. Social workers, we don't make very much money. Again, just so you guys know, and we have six-figure debt. Six-figure debt to not make very much money. They can't afford a house. They can't afford it because of our student loan debt, which is, in the billions as a country. But they could afford apartments. I had a number of my friends and colleagues looking for apartments here based on the fact that I was talking about how much I love working here or living here. And they couldn't find any apartments that they felt like would be what they would want. This project is exactly what my colleagues want. This is exactly what my friends want. Other people my age want. This is it. Our city, whether we like it or not, cannot sustain having, we need to have new families come in. And that's not going to happen if we don't allow for developments like this to come in. And I get it, change is hard. And I hear a lot of concerns and worries. I totally do. Sorry, therapist thing, I'm going to name it for everybody. But I also heard Dominium present facts and statistics based on all of their work in the metro and based on their work, around the country that supports this idea of, that this is what this parking space issue is something that, they look at and that they know, yep, statistically, not everybody's going to have a space. Not everybody's going to need two spaces if they have two people living there. I just want you guys to think about who's come up and who's talked and who's representing, which groups. I have kids here. I'm invested in the school district, as many of you may know. I'm invested in this community, and I want this to be a community where my kids have other kids to play with on the street. And that's not going to happen if we don't allow development like this. So I really hope that you guys consider this moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Kathy Ellers.
Hi, Kathy Ehlers. I'm at 4010 Hayes, 30-plus year resident of Columbia Heights. And I'm kind of nervous, so excuse me. The reason that I wanted to speak before you this evening is to ask a few questions and maybe have a few comments. One is, do we as a city have our own data with regard to families who would like to live in Heights as to whether or not they would prefer to rent or to own a place, for example, a condo that's a family-sized condo? When we built, we collectively, the city had those new townhomes come in Hewsett Park. Those are ownership units. And those were very popular. And those were family-sized units. They bought those. It's possible that the families that we'd like to attract and have stable residents here in the city to be part of our school district and so forth, that they may want to have some wealth building potential and own that unit rather than rent. It's also possible that we need young professional, one efficiency 1 and 2 bedroom units. But when we're talking about family-sized units, I really believe that we need to not rely on industry data, because right now there's a prevalence of this low-income tax bond kind of amenity being given to the developing companies. And those development companies are then also managing these rental properties in the long term, which is a very great boon financially to those companies. If you look at what many real estate investors hope to get out of a rental project, it's 10, 15, maybe even 20% on their return on investment. You and I are not getting that in our savings in our bank accounts. And houses are appreciating, so that is one way that a family who has not previously owned through whatever generational situations has a chance to build some wealth. So I am also very interested in the community's input into the comprehensive plan that's establishing our vision for our community in the next 20 or 30 years. And although there has been very earnest outreach in traditional ways by the consultants and the planners here in Columbia Heights, I will say that firsthand experience, having marched in the Jamboree Parade back with the Girl Scouts 15, 20 years ago, and then this last year, I noticed a complete changeover in the composition, the demographics of our town, and we are not asking those new people who have come in the last 3 to 5 years what sort of housing they would like. And I guess I believe that something like this really should not be pushed ahead at a time when we are gathering data as to what we want to do and where we want to do it. What we have right now in our town, in our city, is a mishmash of what has just happened to pop up here and there, and we haven't had a plan the way St. Louis Park or Hopkins have had. And those are desirable places to live, and I would like Columbia Heights to be a desirable place to live as well. So I differ on some different points from some of what some of the other speakers have said. And I think I hear an underlying concern that the site design maybe doesn't tie in well enough with what's surrounding and what our future goals are for nearby areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Okay, Pat Kennedy?
Hi, I'm Pat Kennedy, and I recently moved to the condominiums. I live in 409, so I don't have this long-standing opposition to change that seems to be what I'm hearing, the opposition to statements by other condo owners. Having recently moved to Columbia Heights from Minneapolis, one of my concerns is I had always been under the understanding that Columbia Heights has a problem with having sufficient affordable owner-occupied housing, that there isn't enough stock to buy. And so in part I object to this, not just as a condo owner, but as a resident of Columbia Heights as a whole, that I believe that Columbia Heights should be working more towards getting affordable housing that is owner-occupied in the city. My second issue is parking. And there's some points that other people haven't brought up. I think what the developer is proposing with the 30% reduction, that I don't think the zoning commission should recommend for that. The developer statistics are based on comparing apples and oranges. Some of those cities are not cities that have 6 months of winter. Having it public transportation or bicycling is all fine and good, but I don't think this is a location that allows you to live completely without a car. I lived without a car. My first car I got at 25. I lived in dorms and apartments before that. I lived in Uptown because they had transportation that went in all directions. It's essentially a hub like downtown Minneapolis. Here, it may be good for getting to work, which I agree, you should be reducing transportation, but that doesn't mean that these people are going to be able to function without a car. I think their car ownership is going to be higher than the developers are projecting, and it's going to lead, and it's just going to make the parking issue much worse. And I think it's ridiculous that they're charging $75 for the underground parking. If it is a city code to have parking places underground as part of apartment buildings, those spots should be part of the apartment and go with the apartment and not force people to pay an additional fee when it's supposed to be affordable housing. I guess that's all I had to add.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else?
Could I follow up on just a quick comment on?
Is there any more comments, Shelley? No, that's it.
I feel like a little bit, Madam Chairman and Commissioners, that it's like class warfare. My age, you're old enough to have rented. I've rented plenty of times. I pay $488, I'm just, put it out on the table. $488 a month for my mortgage, $400 for the HOA, $150 for taxes, $50. Add that up. That's cheaper than what they're paying for rent. And I own it. We just had 2 units sell for around $125,000. That's affordable housing. Now, I don't know if they can build it today for that, but that's what it's worth right now. So it seems to me that this isn't an issue of class warfare, so that the renters need this and we're beating up on the renters. No, we're just saying you're trying to mix apples and oranges. This started off being a condominium development, and everyone that bought in there believed that. And then circumstances were such that we all suffered the downturn. Now, we're being made to pay for that. And unnecessarily so, because the market is now picked up. And there's people who want to build on that. I don't really care if it's condominiums or townhouses or homes. But we're all in a kind of category there where it's not that high of density. As soon as you bring in the apartments, those apartments are very small. 3-bedroom apartment. How many square feet? How many square feet is a 3-bedroom apartment? I guess I could make mine into 4 bedrooms. It'd be pretty small bedrooms. It seems to me that going the route of being fair here is what it was developed for all these years is still possible. Please don't do this. Let's make this a beautiful part of our community. And a small investment could put someone into those condos. And I think that it's possible that either condos or townhouses on that site would really make a lot more sense than what we're seeing here. Thank you again. John Bush.
Okay, thank you.
I keep hearing about these condos and the new development for condos, but we have not, as a city, have not seen anything that indicates that you either have a plan, you have a developer. I mean, so many people have said that. And the other side of it is that we are a working community, and there are people who are just getting out of college, are working really hard, but they can't qualify for a home. And they should have a place where they can live, where they can work possibly towards owning something. Now, there are a lot of homes in Columbia Heights that have become rentals because mom and dad have passed away and the children have said, well, we can't get what we want for it right now, so we're going to rent it. So there is probably more than you even know as far as rental is concerned. And not everybody can afford to buy a house. I know I was in that category when I was first married, and it was really, really hard for us to make that sacrifice.
Not
But
everybody wants to buy a house
and that's the
either.
other thing. A lot of people don't want that home ownership. They don't want that responsibility. They don't want those, all the bills and everything that's connected to it. They would rather rent. And they would rather have that be what their lifestyle is. So I've said my piece.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to address that prior to,
Are we getting into a debate here? Are we debating now, or are we just getting comments?
We're not gonna debate this. I have just heard so many times
I'm answering.
that you want it to be condos, that somebody wants to make it condos. Why didn't Mr. Klober do that? We asked him many times, and he said, no, I'm not gonna do anything with the property.
Mr. Clover has gone the way of high density to get more money out of the property. And now there's a purchase agreement. People are investing time and money to bring forth a apartment building. And I'm not asking you to do anything other than not grant variances. Hoping that they'll just go away so that we can purchase the property. The board has no trepidation anymore.
And they're not asking us for variances.
Right, there are no
I understand
variances
that.
being requested.
Okay.
No, not you guys. If you are only following rules,
That's our job, is to decide if this meets our code. We're kind of a quasi judicial branch, and we're not allowed to do things that don't follow the code, and it would be discriminatory if we gave some people different treatment than other people.
Rob, I understand that. It's done all the time.
I know you do.
And I don't like it.
We're talking to everybody here
And I
too.
don't like it.
Yeah.
Government bodies picking winners and losers. But in this case, there's bad issues over easements that Dominion feels they have over our property, and
Sir,
they've rebuffed.
that is not, I'm sorry,
I
that's
know.
not what our issue is. The reason I brought it up is because I had heard it from you, I've heard it from others. But as a city, we have not seen anything. I've sat on this board for years, and I've never seen any site plans for more condos there. Perhaps there's not a market in Columbia Heights for more condos, but I'll tell you right now, there is a market for people who work downtown, who work in another community, who really do not want to own a home, or are just starting out. And they can't afford all of what's involved in, that gentleman just got through telling me how expensive it is for him to live in a condo with all of the stuff. My daughter lives in a condo, and her association fee is sky high. So I'm saying is that,
Affordable than living in an
I don't think
apartment.
that's affordable.
It doesn't matter. That's not what we're talking.
We're not here to talk about whether you're affordable, or whether I'm affordable, or whether the apartment is affordable.
Something I said, the total of that, if you take your minutes and add it up, is cheaper than some of these rentals.
Right, you're right.
So I'm saying that these folks here.
But they may not want to, and I'm not gonna get into it with you or with you, sir. We interpret the zoning code and using the comprehensive plan to decide whether a development will work within our guidelines. That's all we do. And if it does, we pass it on to the city council, and you all may go and voice your opinion with the city council and ask them not to do anything. We are not the governing body.
And they have
We are advisory.
They have tremendous flexibility.
They do. They have huge flexibility. We do not have flexibility.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I didn't come up to debate. I thought I was answering a question, and I was still unwilling to answer it.
All right, no, I'm gonna ask Owen to address all the issues, if you would, please.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I'll try to be brief. I think I'm gonna kind of just put this back on the screen and put it in reference, because I think it's helpful to, again, look at that. So First, traffic, we're happy to do a traffic study. This is again 15 more units than what was approved 14 years ago. So we're asking to go from 133 to 148 under the ordinance. 15 more homeowners, and I hear that there's an issue with parking because all the parking is mostly underground, because there's not much surface parking. So we're asking for a more balanced amount of underground and surface parking from the condos. So I think some of that concern over traffic and parking is exactly why we picked this site, because it is close to transit. We have 3 schools for the only kid that has to get on a bus to go to school from this site is a kindergartner. Everyone else can walk to school. That, again, is another reason why we picked this site, because you have access to those schools and an ability to reduce traffic and to rely on public transportation, rely on walking, rely on biking, et cetera. So that traffic side, again, we're happy to do a traffic study, but on one level, we're saying we want townhomes and we'll do that, but then we're saying, oh, well, if we did more condos and we have condos, the only people I hear that are opposed to this are the folks in the condo building and maybe one other person that has shown up saying opposed to this. I hear a lot of other people saying this is something we need, the market needs. The average vacancy across the metro for this type of housing is less than 1%. It's a huge demand for housing of all areas. To answer one of the questions, we did not get an offer to purchase this. I'm not really sure where that came from. As far as I understand, most zoning codes do look on gross acreage for how to calculate density. I think Elizabeth answered that. Let's see, the guest parking, again, I mentioned that we're gonna have surface parking, and we have a lot more surface parking than the condo building has, and we purposely designed it that way because we need that surface parking. We want guest parking for our residents. We're gonna permit park ours. The condo's more than welcome to permit park theirs and tow people that park where they're not supposed to and aren't legally able to. Guest parking, just like anyone else who has people over in the city of Columbia Heights, if it's during the day or at night, they park in the street. There's a public street on Grand, there's a public street on 47th, there's cars, it's wide open parking I see all the time on 47th every time I stop by. So there's ample guest parking around. And if those 2 condo buildings were built, the problem would be just the same as they're having today. We're trying to address that by doing it a little differently and bringing some of the parking up to the surface so it is more flexible for either folk. To use, the snow and snow removal, again, we can handle that. Our green space is the same as the condo, so I'm not sure where they're putting their snow then. If it's such an issue, they have the same issues as we would have. There was some concern on fire truck access and things like that. A fully sprinklered building across the United States has never had a fatality in a functioning fully sprinklered building. 0 in the life of sprinkler buildings. So the safety here is in a fully sprinklered building. And on top of that, we got the access to the 20-foot drive aisle for meeting the fire department's requirements. There's a lot of talk about the Master Association. This site was released from the Master Association by the Master Association to not participate in the Master Association. There's no obligation for any future developer, no matter what they do with the site, to join back in and join in that aging community building and reinvest in that. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. But there is no obligation. It's all been released. There are easements that we're following, and legally this is what we can do and follow the original plan. I do feel very bad for folks that were promised by someone something that they couldn't promise. They promised condos. They had no legal right to guarantee condos. They didn't even own the land. So to promise something they couldn't is unfortunate, and the recession hurt a lot of people, and clearly it hurt some condo owners. But $125,000 for a condo, no one would ever build and no bank would ever lend to someone to build something, because it would cost on average $300,000 a unit to sell a condo in order to build it. The market just doesn't support it in that location. And the sale he mentioned, 125 grand, you couldn't build it for that. You'd have to build it and sell for around 300 to get a condo to work. So I think it's gonna be a long time before anything like that would be feasible. I mentioned the schools. I think that's a great addition, and why, again, we really looked at this site. Workforce housing and this rental housing is, as you mentioned, Madam Chair, does allow this transition to homeownership because our rents are capped. Affordable housing is set up that way on purpose when it was created in 1986 to cap rents. So we can't raise the rents if the resident gets a raise. The rents are based on the rents of the area and determined by HUD. So that resident can save money to transition to buy a house and fix it up and invest in that community by setting its roots in Columbia Heights, and then reinvest in the community as they build some savings in order to afford a down payment to buy a house. So just wanted to mention that. I already mentioned the economic loss. This very clearly meets the comp plan. The TOD plan on this, the original development plan, as you see on the screen, is besides flipping this building 180 degrees, it's almost exactly the same. It's 15 more apartments. Across the 15 acres, that's 1 apartment per acre. It's very minor changes from what was approved 14 years ago. The parking is absolutely apples to apples. I'm not sure I think Minneapolis, St. Paul, and other areas can have the same winter as Columbia Heights, so I'm not sure where that came from. In the transit location, we are 200 feet from a bus stop. It's right outside our front door. That's, again, why we chose this site and why we think it's a great transit-friendly site that will encourage people to walk to school, will encourage people to use transit, and hopefully encourage Met Council to continue to invest on Central. And then size, these are bigger than a lot of market rate apartments. A lot of market rate apartments are in the 700 square foot range. Ours are about 750 for a 1-bedroom. Our 2 bedrooms are around the 1,050, and our 3 bedrooms around 1,300 to 1,340. So that's compared to market rate, urban type development, that's actually above average for unit sizes for rental. So condos are a different animal, but for rental goes, this will be luxury, market rate quality housing at an affordable price. And thank you for your time. I'm happy to, I think I grabbed most of the questions, but I'm sure I missed something. So if there's others you guys have, please let me know.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you guys have any more questions now that he's?
I got one quick question. The Hy-Vee site, how many acres was that if that's not part of the 15 acres anymore?
I know it was over an acre. I don't recall offhand. I want to say it's.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioners, I don't know exactly, but the 15 acres, I believe, is just.
I believe so
this.
too.
I don't think it included the
No,
Hy-Vee.
no, because that was a different, totally different development. Where the condos are is residential. Was a residential plat. The other one was a commercial plot. So it's not even considered in
I
that.
just heard it brought up, so I was kind of
Right,
curious.
right.
The
Right.
question about the parking wasn't answered. Can, down underground
Oh.
parking, only residents can lease that? Am I correct in that?
That's how we typically set it up, Madam Chair, Commissioners, member of the audience. We typically set it up for our residents and we plan for our residents. Should we be underparked or should we have extra parking and someone wants to rent, certainly they could approach us. We don't typically advertise for that because we want to save it for future residents, but there's nothing that would preclude us from doing that. It's not our practice to rent to outside. We have some buildings where we do master lease to some adjacent users where they have the right to use some spaces if we have extra. But I think we have an appropriate for this.
That's okay, that's none of our business anyway.
That's right, it's not.
But wait a second. How can that not be part of your business if that's the determination of the parking? Those parking spaces there are to be used by the residents so people aren't on the streets. That's why we have the underground parking in Columbia Heights. That's why that's required. I don't understand how that could be, how you could rent that out to outsiders. I have no problem if it's for the insiders, but outsiders, then you have those people out on the street.
You don't do that as a regular
Madam Chair.
process, do you?
We don't do that as a standard practice. Like I said, if we have a full apartment building, which we expect, our average apartment, like I said, is 1% vacancy. So 99% of the apartments are occupied on an annualized basis. And we rent the spots just to our residents. But let's say we're full and half the garage spots are empty. Anyone can rent to anyone. So, in theory, we could rent to a condo owner if they need it, but it's not likely that would ever happen. But I don't want to say it's impossible. So I guess that's.
So you would give priority to the apartment owners and not lease to anyone else unless there was capacity?
Yeah, it's and likewise, we're taking,
Yeah.
as an owner, we're not gonna build something that's gonna be underparked, because guess what? someone's gonna show up and they're not gonna rent because they can't get a parking spot, because of the permit parking. So we're investing a lot of money into this site, and we're very confident that we're gonna have enough parking for residents, with extra for guests, and not be turning away apartments that have vacant apartments because we don't have enough parking spots. So I think that, again, is data, that's evidence from us. I can mention the number of adults we have per apartment unit again, and we're providing more parking than that, and that's assuming every adult has a car, which isn't the data that we have, for our portfolio. But, I know it's a concern. We're happy with traffic study. We purposely added, the original plan had only one entrance to, or two entrances, one at the north and one in the middle. We've actually added a second entrance, down here because the one got built in this location. So we're purposely trying to add an alternate means of ingress and egress for the site. So there's actually one more access point than what was originally planned. And again, we're talking about 15 more apartments or homes, compared to the 133 that was approved 14 years ago. I think we can all agree roads may be busier, but transit has improved. And it's a very small change from what was approved 14 years ago. And that, again, that average density is how it's approved. We're well below the 20 units an acre, when you look at it in that context, and also meet it, as Elizabeth pointed out, based on just our little site.
Okay.
I have one question, just
Please,
very,
okay.
very briefly. I know we're all getting tired here. But I think it's important. I noticed there's some dotted lines on your drawings here that show some potential additional parking spots. Is that correct? And is that there in case you need more parking in the future?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, I think the dash parking you see is actually on the condo site. We've been proposing to build out some additional parking where they have green space because of some parking concerns they have at their own site. So we've offered to add surface parking, nose-in parking for the condominium association, and build that out as part of our construction. And that raises a question I didn't have a chance to answer. We'd be fully responsible for all the retaining wall. We'd be fully responsible for all our roads. I'm not really sure where this additional cost is coming from. We've offered to share in the cost of the main roads to get in and out of the building. So I've been working with the condominium association president, trying to come up with something that isn't adding costs, and if anything, it should save, but we're certainly not gonna add into the master association. But yes, we are showing some spots that could be added should the master association want those to be added, and we've been offered to help do that.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay.
You're welcome.
All right, are there any other questions from the commission? And thank you for taking notes and answering all those concerns. I appreciate
Thanks
it.
for hanging out with us and patience.
Okay, at this point, I will close the public hearing and ask if there are any more questions or comments from the commissioners. If not, okay, we will consider some sort of motion. It is on, what staff is recommending is on page 6, I believe. Yes, at the bottom of page 6. You got it, Rob?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, I realize I didn't put in a motion to waive the reading of the resolution.
But we need to do that. Do we not?
Or we need to read it.
Yes.
Waive to read, move to waive the reading. You want to do that, Rob?
I can do that, yes. I'll move that we waive the reading of
It would be.
motion number 2017-0109, being ample copies available to the public.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded that we waive the reading. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Okay,
I move that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the proposed development of the properties located at 1069 Grand View Way and 4729 Grand Avenue, subject to the conditions of approval printed on the final document. That is also available to the public.
correct.
Where are you reading?
On the bottom of page 6.
I didn't read, I just said
He
it.
just kind of said that, well.
I said what's
there
normally
are-
there.
Yeah, there are 15
Conditions of
conditions of
approval.
approval,
That are,
which are already in,
There we
which
go.
are in the record. Shelley has them.
that are printed on the sample resolution
Yep,
that will be going in front of the city council.
right.
So your motion approves the 20-foot drive aisle,
That is, yes,
and a recommendation to the council to approve the plan?
that is my motion, yes, and I believe that that is what the ordinance, I think it meets what the ordinance requires.
That's what staff recommends?
That's correct.
Sorry. Second that.
Got a second?
What?
My motion has been seconded.
Did you second his motion? I'm sorry, I couldn't
did,
hear
yeah.
you. Okay. All right, motion has been made and seconded that we approve the proposed development and move it to the city council for their approval. And a second has been made. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Do you want to,
Do you want a roll call?
yes, I do.
Novitsky,
Aye.
Aye.
Ferrandino, Hoyam,
Aye.
Schill,
Aye.
Zurich.
Yes. Okay. That's all we need to do. Jim, is there anything else we have to do? That's what we're, okay, any other business?
No other business.
All right, seeing that our agenda is complete, we are adjourned.
Madam Chair, when is this before the city council?
Oh, the city council meeting is next
Monday.
Monday night.
So if anyone has any opinions that they'd like to voice to the city
Feel
council,
free to
Monday
go to
night.
the council meeting.
They like comments.
Yeah, they do.